A single-father CEO accidentally hires the wrong tutor for his daughter, but he never expected that she would be the woman who could change his life forever. The sunset painted the sky in hues of amber, its fading light casting a golden glow over the Manhattan skyline. The last rays of the day reflected off the glass windows of a luxurious penthouse, illuminating the sleek interior with a warm shimmer. Nathaniel Carter, CEO of a leading financial firm, sat behind his desk, his sharp gaze skimming over his laptop screen as he signed off on a stack of critical documents. Nathaniel was not a man who embraced spontaneity. Every aspect of his life was meticulously planned: his career, his routines, and most importantly, the way he raised his daughter. So when the time came to hire a new tutor for Lily, he left the entire selection process to his assistant. His only requirement: disciplined, strict, and highly professional. A chime echoed through the penthouse. Nathaniel unlocked the door remotely, rising from his chair and stepping into the hallway. He was ready to meet the tutor he trusted had been carefully vetted, but the moment the door swung open, his brows immediately furrowed. Standing before him was not a stern-looking educator. In a neatly pressed suit, Emma Brooks was nothing like what he had pictured. Soft waves of chestnut hair framed her face, falling effortlessly around her shoulders. Her eyes were bright, mischievous, yet warm. She wore a flowing floral dress paired with simple flats. Too casual, too carefree. Emma tilted her head slightly, flashing a cheerful smile. "Hi, I'm Emma Brooks. It's a pleasure to meet you." Nathaniel crossed his arms, his voice cool and controlled. "Who are you?" "You're not the person I hired." Emma blinked, briefly surprised, before letting out a light laugh. A soft, amused sound that made Nathaniel feel as though he was the punchline of some unseen joke. "Really? Because I was pretty sure I just got the job." Her easy confidence only irritated him further. Before he could respond, a small voice chimed in. "Will you play with me?" Nathaniel turned to see his 5-year-old daughter, Lily, peeking out from behind the door. Her big, curious eyes locked onto Emma. The moment Emma's bright smile reached her, Lily's face lit up, and she stepped forward eagerly. Nathaniel glanced between his daughter and the woman at his door. He hesitated. He didn't have the time to start the hiring process all over again. Not right now. Emma's smile turned playful, a spark of mischief in her eyes. "So, Mr. Carter, shall we begin?" Nathaniel clenched his jaw. He disliked surprises. He hated feeling like he wasn't in control. But as he looked down at Lily's hopeful expression, he knew he couldn't simply send this woman away. He exhaled sharply, folding his arms. 1 week. "That's all." Emma winked. "A week is more than enough for me to prove myself." Nathaniel wasn't sure about that. But one thing he did know for certain: Emma Brooks was nothing like what he had expected, and that unsettled him more than he cared to admit. Morning light spilled through the massive windows of the penthouse, reflecting off the polished hardwood floors. Nathaniel Carter adjusted the cuffs of his dress shirt, preparing to leave after his early morning virtual meetings. At the dining table, Lily happily played with her pancakes, chattering excitedly about her plans for the day. But what caught Nathaniel's attention wasn't his daughter, it was Emma Brooks. She leaned casually against the kitchen counter, a teacup in hand, her loose curls slightly tousled. It had only been a day, yet she was already far too comfortable. In his home. "Remember, this is a trial week," Nathaniel reminded her, his tone sharp. Emma took a slow sip of tea, her expression unshaken. "I remember. And I'm still here, aren't I?" Nathaniel exhaled, forcing himself to stay composed. "Stick to the curriculum I provided. No improvising." Emma shrugged, but there was a playful glint in her eyes. Chaos unfolds later. That morning, Nathaniel returned home after forgetting an important document. As he passed Lily's study room, he froze. Laughter, loud, uninhibited laughter, echoed from behind the half-open door. Frowning, he pushed it open and immediately stopped in his tracks. The room was a disaster zone. Construction paper, scissors, and crayons were scattered across the floor. A corner of the room had been transformed into a pillow and blanket fort, and in the center of it all, Emma Brooks sat cross-legged on the floor, animatedly telling a story, while Lily cut out shapes from colored paper. So the little dinosaur decided that learning letters didn't have to mean sitting still. He could learn while running, drawing, even while dancing. Lily giggled. "Miss Emma, I'm done with my picture." Nathaniel's voice cut through the air. "What kind of lesson is this?" The room fell silent. Emma and Lily turned toward him. He stood. In the doorway, arms crossed, his cold gaze sweeping across the mess. "I told you to keep things structured." Emma calmly stood, meeting his glare without hesitation. "I am teaching Lily, and she's learning just fine." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "I didn't hire you to play with my daughter." Emma narrowed her eyes. "Are you sure she learns best by sitting still?" Nathaniel frowned, but Emma didn't give him a chance to argue. Children aren't machines. They learn best when they're happy. His arms remained crossed, his voice even. "That's your theory. But what about results?" Emma didn't flinch. She picked up Lily's drawing and turned to the little girl. "Lily, can you read this word for your dad?" Lily nodded eagerly, reading each letter out loud, then explaining why blue represented happiness and the heart symbolized love. For a brief moment, Nathaniel was silent. He couldn't deny that Lily had absorbed the lesson, just not in the way he had expected, but the rigid part of him refused to acknowledge that so easily. His gaze flickered to Emma, his tone low. 1 week, no more. Emma smiled, something knowing in her eyes. 1 week is all I need. Nathaniel turned and left, irritation simmering beneath his skin. Emma Brooks was different, too free-spirited, too unfazed by his authority. But what unsettled him most, Lily actually liked the way she taught. Just as he stepped into the hallway, he overheard Lily whisper to Emma, "Daddy doesn't like to smile. But I think he needs a teacher who likes fun, just like me." Nathaniel paused. His grip on his briefcase tightened, but he didn't look back. Still, her words lingered in his mind the entire drive to work. Saturday morning. The peaceful Saturday morning unfolded under golden sunlight, stretching over cobblestone paths. A soft breeze rustled through the trees, carrying the crisp scent of grass and flowers. Children's laughter echoed across the open field as families gathered to enjoy the weekend. Everything exuded relaxation, except for Nathaniel Carter. He stood with his arms crossed, brows furrowed, watching the scene before him with clear skepticism. A math lesson. In the park. To him, this was pointless. But Lily had begged him the night before, her excitement so infectious that he couldn't say no. And so here he was, eyeing Emma Brooks warily as she arranged small pebbles on the grass. Emma crouched down, picking up a few stones. "Today we're going to learn math, but in a special way." Lily's eyes widened with curiosity. "What way, Miss Emma?" Emma smiled, placing 3 pebbles together before adding 2 more. "Can you tell me how many there are in total?" Lily scrunched her nose, counting slowly, then suddenly beamed. 5. Nathaniel exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "Learning in a park? I don't see how this could be effective." Emma didn't look up, calmly continuing the lesson. "You might not think so. But can you wait and see what happens?" Nathaniel clenched his jaw but chose to stay silent. Lily continued grouping the pebbles, slow but focused. Emma didn't correct her mistakes immediately. She let her figure them out on her own. Nathaniel watched everything. No pressure, no rigid expectations, just curiosity, freedom. And somehow, Lily was learning faster than ever. Emma placed 7 pebbles down and removed 3. "Now can you tell me how many are left?" Lily hesitated. Nathaniel held his breath, a brief pause. Then Lily suddenly lit up. 4. There are 4 pebbles left. Nathaniel blinked. She had never picked up a concept this quickly before. He murmured under his breath, barely realizing he had spoken out loud. Emma cast him a quick glance, something knowing flickering in her eyes, but she said nothing. Nathaniel stood still. This was working. And it was unlike anything he had ever considered. He kept watching. But this time his gaze wasn't just on Lily. Emma. She didn't scold Lily for mistakes. She didn't pressure her, didn't enforce strict rules. She let her explore, let her enjoy the process of learning. Nathaniel had never taught Lily that way. He had never seen anyone teach like that. Something inside him shifted, ever so slightly, a strange feeling he couldn't quite name. Emma Brooks wasn't just an unconventional tutor. She was unlike anyone he had ever met. Nathaniel didn't change his mind right away. The one-week trial still stood, and there were still things he wanted to prove. But as he walked out of the park that morning, his steps were slower than usual, and in his mind, questions began to surface. Had he been too rigid with Lily? Was there a better way? Those thoughts unsettled Nathaniel Carter, a man who had always been certain about everything. But Emma Brooks, she was making him question everything he had ever believed, and that was more unnerving than anything else. A line crossed the city lights reflected against the glass windows, casting long streaks of gold and silver across the quiet office. Nathaniel Carter sat at his desk, fingers resting on his laptop keyboard, but he hadn't typed a single word. The screen in front of him displayed rows of numbers and financial charts, yet his mind was utterly blank. Ever since that day in the park, something had been gnawing at him. A strange, unsettling feeling, as if he had lost control of something without realizing it. He had always believed that discipline and structure were the best things for Lily, but over the past few days, he couldn't ignore the truth. She was happier than she had ever been. No, it was temporary. Nathaniel forced the thought into place. Emma Brooks was just a tutor, a reckless, impulsive woman who did things her own way. Sooner or later, her methods would fail. He needed to distance himself, to regain control. But then something small shattered the wall of logic he had been trying so hard to rebuild. Nathaniel wasn't sure how it had ended up on his desk. Maybe Lily had left it there when she came running in to hug him earlier. He had been too distracted to notice. A drawing, crayon lines, bright colors, simple strokes of a child's imagination. In the picture, Lily had drawn 3 people, one tall man in a black suit, a woman with warm eyes and curly hair, and a little girl standing between them, holding both their hands. Nathaniel's heart stuttered. He knew exactly who they were. Beneath the drawing, in wobbly letters, Lily had written, "Happy Family." His fingers tightened around the paper. A storm of emotions rose inside him. Confusion, denial, a sharp pang of fear he couldn't name. Family? He and Lily. He understood that. But Emma? She didn't belong here. She was just a tutor, a stranger who had stepped into their lives for a brief moment. And now in the span of a single week, his daughter saw her as family? No, this wasn't right. This couldn't be right. Nathaniel shot to his feet, the drawing trembling slightly in his grasp. The feeling of losing control coiled tighter around him. Emma Brooks. What had she done to make Lily so attached to her? For a fleeting second, a dangerous thought crossed his mind. Was this intentional? Was she trying to carve a place for herself in their lives on purpose? He couldn't let that happen. Nathaniel Carter never let anyone break past the walls he had built. A decision made outside the office, Lily sat on the floor playing with her dolls. The moment she saw her father step out, her face lit up. "Daddy, Miss Emma is coming tomorrow, right?" Nathaniel didn't answer right away. He looked down at his daughter, his chest tightening at the pure happiness in her eyes. Emma had gotten too close. She had slipped into their world in a way he hadn't allowed anyone to. He had to stop this. His grip on the drawing tightened. "Lily," his voice was firm. "Tomorrow will be Miss Emma's last lesson." Lily blinked. "What? But why?" "I've made my decision." His tone left no room for argument. But instead of nodding like she usually did, Lily's lips pressed together, her eyes glistening. "But I like Miss Emma. She makes me happy. She's a great teacher. You can't just send her away." Nathaniel inhaled deeply. "She can't stay here forever, Lily." "Why not? She's family." His heart clenched. "Family." Lily's voice cracked as tears welled up in her eyes. "Please, Daddy, don't make her go." Nathaniel turned away, unable to face the sight of her crying. But he couldn't change his mind. He had to protect his family, the only way he knew how. Lily sobbed, then ran into her room, slamming the door behind her. Nathaniel stood there, feeling emptier than ever. The goodbye. The next morning, when Emma arrived, Lily didn't run to the door like she always did. She hid in her room, face streaked with dried tears. Emma turned to Nathaniel, searching his expression. "What did you say to her?" Nathaniel inhaled, slowly, keeping his voice steady. "Your contract is up. Today is your last lesson." Emma studied him for a long moment. A flicker of sadness passed through her eyes. "Does Lily get a say in this? Or is this just another thing you need to control?" Nathaniel remained silent. Emma let out a quiet sigh, then nodded. "Then I'll say goodbye to her. But you know what, Nathaniel?" She paused at the door, looking at him directly. "You're not just hurting Lily. You're hurting yourself, too." Then she stepped out of the apartment, the door clicking shut behind her. And for the first time in years, Nathaniel Carter felt a hollowness he couldn't explain. A moment of clarity. Nathaniel thought time would set everything back in order, that Lily would forget Emma soon enough, and life would return to the way it was. But he was wrong. Only a day after Emma left, Lily grew quiet. She no longer chatted excitedly about her lessons, no longer filled her sketchbook with colorful drawings. Mealtimes stretched longer, weighed down by her silence. Nathaniel forced himself to ignore it. He convinced himself that she just needed time to adjust. But every time he walked into her room and saw her curled up with her stuffed bear, staring blankly out the window, an uneasy feeling tightened its grip on him. Until one night, a nightmare changed everything. 2:14 a.m. The vast penthouse was cloaked in silence. Nathaniel had never been one to sleep much, but tonight his sleep was restless, fractured. Then he heard it, a small whimper, followed by a weak cough. His eyes snapped open. A sharp sense of dread pulled him upright. He was moving before he could think, nearly sprinting to Lily's room, his heartbeat thundering in his chest. The moment he pushed the door open, he froze. Lily lay curled beneath the blankets, her tiny face flushed with fever. Her breathing was shallow, her forehead damp with sweat. But what shattered Nathaniel was the fragile, delirious whisper escaping her lips. "Miss Emma. Miss Emma." His heart clenched. "Lily." "It's Daddy," he said. Kneeling beside her bed, his hand brushing against her forehead, burning hot. His fingers trembled. What now? The thing he feared most, losing control, was happening right in front of him, a call he never expected to make. Nathaniel tried to care for Lily himself. He poured her a glass of water, but when he pressed it to her lips, it was too hot, making her wince. He reached for the thermometer, but in his haste, his hand knocked it off the nightstand, sending it rolling across the floor. He didn't know how to comfort her, didn't know how to soothe her the way she needed. For the first time in his life, Nathaniel Carter felt helpless. And then Lily whimpered again, barely above a breath. She was calling for Emma. His grip tightened around his phone. Should he call her? Pride held his fingers still over the screen. But then he looked at Lily, small, fragile, trembling in her fevered sleep. There was no choice. He dialed. The ringing felt endless in the stillness of the night. Then, a groggy but instantly alert voice answered. "Nathaniel, why are you calling at this hour?" Nathaniel took a slow breath. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse. "Lily has a fever. She keeps calling for you." There was a split second of silence, then the sound of a bed creaking, the rustling of fabric. "I'm coming." No hesitation, no questions. And Nathaniel realized he had been waiting for that answer more than anything else. 15 minutes later, Emma practically ran into the apartment. She was still wearing an oversized sweater and sweatpants, her hair tousled from sleep. But Nathaniel couldn't remember the last time someone had entered his life with such urgency, such unwavering sincerity. She didn't spare him a glance. Her focus was only on Lily. Emma dropped to her knees beside the bed, hands gently pressing against Lily's forehead, her face tight with worry. "Lily, I'm here." Lily's lashes fluttered. When she saw Emma, a faint smile crossed her fevered face. You really came?" "I'm not going anywhere," Emma whispered, her voice soft as a breeze. Nathaniel stood in the corner of the room, watching. Emma dipped a cloth into cool water, and pressed it lightly against Lily's forehead. She whispered soothing reassurances, hummed a lullaby, one Nathaniel had never heard before, but clearly Lily had. And somehow, impossibly, within minutes, Lily's breathing slowed, her tiny body relaxing under Emma's care. Nathaniel couldn't look away. He watched the way Emma gently smoothed Lily's hair, the way she held her small hand with infinite patience, as if she had always belonged here. And for the first time, Nathaniel no longer questioned it. Emma Brooks had no ulterior motive. She was here for Lily because she cared, because she loved her. And maybe, just maybe, she cared about him too. Nathaniel had spent days convincing himself that she was an outsider, that she had no place in their world. But tonight, standing in the shadows of Lily's room, watching Emma with his daughter, for the first time in his life, Nathaniel Carter realized she wasn't an outsider at all. Everything changed after that night. Nathaniel thought time would restore order, that Lily would forget Emma soon enough, that life would return to the way it was. But he was wrong. Only a day after Emma left, Lily grew quieter. She no longer chattered about her lessons, no longer filled her sketchbook with bright colors. Mealtime stretched longer, filled with silence. Nathaniel ignored it at first. He told himself she just needed time to adjust. But every time he walked into her room and found her curled up with her stuffed bear, staring out the window with distant eyes, a slow, uneasy weight settled in his chest. Restlessness. He didn't like this. Didn't like the emptiness when he glanced at the couch and realized Emma was no longer there. Didn't like the quiet in the apartment. Didn't like how Lily's laughter had faded into something softer, something lesser. But most of all, he hated the way he felt the emptiness too. Nathaniel Carter was not a man who dealt well with emotions. He didn't even know how to name the thing clawing at his mind, so he did what he always did when faced with uncertainty. He buried himself in work. But even numbers couldn't distract him. His hand gripped his phone, his thumb hovering over Emma's name in his contacts, a message he typed, then deleted, a call he pressed the button, then hung up. Nathaniel Carter had never hesitated in any decision he made. But now a single text felt impossible, and he didn't realize a pair of small eyes had been watching him from across the room. The question that changed everything. The soft sound of footsteps on the hardwood made him look up. Lily stood in front of him, clutching her stuffed bear. Her brown hair fell in loose waves around her face, and for a moment she said nothing, just tilted her head, studying him with a quiet wisdom beyond her years. Then she asked, "Daddy, do you love Miss Emma?" The question hit like a stone cast into still water, sending ripples through everything he thought he knew. Nathaniel froze. He had no answer. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Lily waited patiently, as if she knew this was a moment her father needed to face. Love? He had never let himself think of it. Or rather, he had spent all this time avoiding thinking of it. Emma Brooks was just a tutor, a stranger who had stepped into their lives. But was that really all she was? Nathaniel thought back to the way Emma had been with Lily, the way she made her laugh, the way she taught with patience instead of strictness, the way she had filled this house with something he hadn't even realized was missing, and more than anything, the way he had changed because of her. Fear Nathaniel Carter had never been afraid of anything, but standing in the middle of his quiet apartment, the one thing he felt was fear. Fear of opening his heart again. Fear of trusting someone only to be left behind. Fear that if he let Emma, and truly let her in, she could leave whenever she wanted, just like the others had, just like the woman he once loved, who had walked away from him and Lily without looking back. He had convinced himself he didn't need anyone, that he and Lily were enough. But Emma had stepped into their lives so effortlessly, and now that she was gone, Nathaniel felt the emptiness she had left behind. He looked at Lily. She was still waiting. Nathaniel tightened his grip on his phone, took a deep breath. He knew what he had to do. He couldn't let fear control him anymore. He couldn't hurt Lily with his stubbornness, and he couldn't lose the chance to have something he had spent so long denying himself. Nathaniel sat down, pulling Lily close his voice low but steady. "Lily, I think I really need to talk to Miss Emma." First step forward. Nathaniel had never felt nervous about sending a message before, but when he hit send, inviting Emma to the park, his fingers trembled, just slightly. She could say no. She could refuse to see him again, and after everything that had happened, he would deserve it. But when the notification popped up, "I'll be there," Nathaniel realized he had been holding his breath, waiting for that answer more than he cared to admit. And now, here he was, out in the open air, yet somehow feeling like something was pressing against his chest. A few steps away, Lily was giggling, tossing small pebbles into the pond. Emma was there too. She wore a soft blue dress, simple yet effortlessly graceful, her curls dancing in the afternoon breeze. But it wasn't her appearance that held Nathaniel's attention. It was the way she made everything around her feel warmer. This time, Emma didn't walk up to him first. She waited, because this time he had to be the one to move, and so he did. The words he needed to say, Nathaniel stepped up beside Emma, standing next to her in silence. Together they watched Lily play, her laughter ringing through the peaceful air. At last, he spoke, his voice steady, yet laced with something more fragile than before. "Lily misses you." Emma nodded softly, her gaze distant. "I know." Nathaniel flexed his fingers, keeping his eyes on his daughter. He knew what he had to say next, but it wasn't easy. He took a slow, measured breath. "So do I." Emma stilled. Her eyes widened just slightly, but she didn't turn to face him yet. Nathaniel pressed on, his voice quiet but unwavering. "I've been afraid," he admitted. "Losing my ex-wife made me close myself off. I thought that if I didn't open up, I wouldn't get hurt again." Emma didn't interrupt. Nathaniel let out a low, self-deprecating chuckle. "But then you came along and you made me realize maybe I was wrong about a lot of things." This time, he finally turned to look at her. No more avoiding, no more running. Emma was still there, listening, not judging, not demanding, just waiting for whatever it was he truly wanted to say. And Nathaniel understood, in that moment, why he had let her in, why he had needed her in his life. Because she had never tried to push him, never asked for more than he was ready to give. She had simply been there, patient, honest, real. A choice. Nathaniel inhaled deeply, for the first time in his life, feeling the weight of uncertainty. But he wasn't going to let fear stop him anymore. He turned to fully face her, his gaze deep and steady. "I don't know what the future holds," he admitted, "but I know one thing, I want you to be in it, and if you're willing, we can figure out what that means together." Not a grand declaration, not an impulsive promise, just an invitation, one step forward if she wanted to take it with him. Emma studied him for a long moment. Nathaniel had never been anxious about someone's reaction before, but this time, he cared, and then a soft, knowing smile curled on Emma's lips. She didn't answer with words. Instead, she reached out, gently taking his hand in hers. A simple touch, but it was enough. Nathaniel felt something inside him loosen, a quiet breath of relief filling his lungs. Across the park, Lily turned, catching sight of them. She squinted, then giggled as if everything had finally fallen into place exactly the way it was meant to. Nathaniel tightened his fingers around Emma's, letting himself hold on to this moment. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't afraid anymore. The journey to happiness, soft sunlight bathed the park, glistening off the surface of the small pond nearby. The air carried the fresh scent of grass and earth, blending with the distant laughter of children playing on the swings. On a wide stretch of grass, Nathaniel, Emma, and Lily sat gathered around a picnic blanket, surrounded by baskets of food and chilled fruit juice. Lily squealed with laughter, chasing a small golden-furred puppy as it wagged its tail excitedly. "Faster, Max." "You'll never catch me," she shouted, her tiny legs pumping with boundless energy. Emma chuckled, watching her with quiet fondness. "Best adoption decision I've ever made," she mused, half joking as she turned to Nathaniel. Nathaniel took A slow sip of coffee from his paper cup, his gaze never leaving Lily. "At least it's the only thing I agreed to without hesitation," he admitted, arching a brow. "Everything else, I think I'm still learning how to accept." Emma studied him, waiting. Nathaniel exhaled, feeling lighter than he had in years. He looked at Lily, then back at Emma, and for the first time he found the courage to say something that truly mattered, without hesitation. "I used to think happiness came from control," he said slowly, as if measuring each word. "But maybe happiness is learning to embrace the unexpected and knowing when to hold on to it." Emma didn't respond right away. She tilted her head slightly, her warm gaze filled with understanding. Nathaniel had never been good at expressing emotions, but right now he didn't feel the pressure to say it perfectly. He only knew that he didn't want to lose what he had found. Taking a deep breath, he continued, his voice low, steady, and honest. "I don't know what the future holds, but I know one thing. I want you to be in it, in whatever way that means." Emma raised a brow, slightly surprised by his choice of words, but then she let out a quiet laugh, something soft and knowing flickering in her eyes. "You know," she said, her voice calm yet undeniably gentle, "not everything needs a plan." She shrugged. "Sometimes you just let things happen." Nathaniel chuckled. He used to hate spontaneity, but somehow, hearing it from Emma, it didn't seem so terrifying anymore. He nodded. "Maybe you're right." Before either of them could say another word, Lily came running back, grabbing both their hands and tugging hard. "Daddy." "Miss Emma, let's go on the Ferris wheel." Nathaniel laughed. He thought back to the version of himself who once found things like this meaningless, but now he wanted to join in, not just for Lily, not just for Emma, but for himself. Rising to his feet, he extended a hand toward Emma, his gaze warmer than before. "Ready for another little adventure?" Emma smiled, slipping her hand into his. "Always." Lily cheered, pulling them both toward the rides. Nathaniel had never imagined that an ordinary morning like this could feel so whole, and as he glanced over at Emma, watching the way her smile lit up the world around her, he knew he had found something he never even realized he needed. Happiness isn't a destination, it's the journey we choose to take together. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. If you believe that happiness isn't about controlling everything, but about embracing the unexpected, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more meaningful stories. Tell us, in the comments, do you think Nathaniel has finally found what truly matters in his life? What would you do if you were in Emma's shoes? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Turn on notifications so you won't miss our next story, because who knows? One of them might just speak to you.